In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
I'm Bill Dries, reporter for the Daily Memphian. We are talking with Shelby County Elections Administrator Linda Phillips and Ian Randolph of the Shelby County Voter Alliance, and this is On the Record. We record this Thursday, October 27th, day 8 of the 14 days of early voting ahead of the November 8th election day in Shelby County and across the state, just ahead of the second and final weekend of early voting, which is what we are here today to talk about. First, the turnout numbers for Shelby County through 7 days of early voting, 44,302. This compares to 87,598 at this point in early voting 4 years ago in the same election cycle, and 25,621 in the same election cycle in 2014, 8 years ago. So this looks like fewer votes than 2018, but more than 2014 so far. Linda Phillips, what do you think of the numbers so far?
Well, I always hope for 100% turnout in every election, but there are some hotly contested races in the municipalities around the core of Memphis that are having better turnout. There are a lot of voters who really don't have many choices in this election. So I can understand why getting out and voting when everybody's already been elected is not your highest priority.
Mm-hmm. Ian Randolph, from your look at the turnout by the 26 sites here in Shelby County, what numbers jump out at you about how we're doing so far?
Ms. Phillips on that, I always hope for 100% turnout as well. Our numbers have not come anywhere close to that. Some of the things that stand out to me are some of the lower performing places, like in Fraser, with the They have, I think the last time I looked, the second lowest turnout of all the precincts around Shelby County. And when I look at those numbers, it just tells me that, at least for the Voter Alliance, there's some work that we need to do in other parts of the city.
Mm-hmm. So the interest that we see in some of the suburban races, Bartlett has the only contested mayor's race, and the candidates there are running to succeed Keith McDonald in the mayor's office in Bartlett. The school board races in Collierville and Germantown that have drawn attention. It kind of reminds us, I think, that all politics is local. So, Ian, to you, what does that make then the national political rhetoric that defines the partisan division nationally and within Shelby County, where we have a city that is the biggest blue patch in the state, and the county outside the city is the largest base of Republican voters of any single county in the state? What value do those talking points on national issues have if they don't really seem to be driving voters more than the local races?
Well, as you all said just a little bit earlier, a lot of the races that are going on in Shelby County, especially for the state house, are uncontested. Once those people won their primaries, they didn't have any opposition going into the general election. So, those races are pretty much decided. So I can understand why somebody would say, well, I don't think I need to go vote because I like my House representative on the Tennessee side, so they're going to win anyway. I'll just stay home. But I think what a lot of people overlook are the ballot amendments that are on coming up in November. And those things will have an impact on Tennessee for decades and decades to come. So I think back in like 2016, you can't just look at the immediate impact of the election. You have to think about further down the road and what impact your vote is going to have on the future of Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Linda, let's talk a bit about those amendments. There are 4 amendments to the Tennessee Constitution that voters approve or reject. The second of the four amendments takes up an entire page on the touchscreen machines. So after a week of early voting, I think you said at the outset that you estimated this ballot would take voters about 3 minutes average. This is before the early voting started, and that compares to 8 minutes average for the big ballot in August. What does the average time per voter look like now that we've got several days of early voting under our belt?
It's about what I figured. If you go in, if you've read the amendments before you go in, it's a very quick ballot. If you are sitting there at the voting machine and this is the first time you have perused the amendments, it's taking you more like 5 to 6 minutes. So about what we figured, and we've got plenty of capacity out there. So, we really don't have any lines.
Right. Right. Ian, there's a really heated campaign going on the right to work, as it's called, amendment. That is one of the four constitutional amendments. From what you're seeing, are voters picking up on that campaign, the two sides of that, or are they just looking at it like they do the other three amendments that are on there?
Canvassing and talking to people in the field. It's kind of 50-50. I'd say about half of the people that we talk to have some idea about the amendments that are showing up. The other half are totally unaware of the amendments that are showing up on the ballot. Like I said, it's about half and half. I wish people were a little bit more excited about the constitutional ballot amendments because, like I said earlier, these things are going to impact the future of the state of Tennessee for decades to come. And just to throw it out there, I was curious. I voted by paper. You get an on-demand paper ballot printed at your early voting site, and it took me about 5 minutes to do it. And I already knew what I was voting for when I walked in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Linda, that brings up a good point. As both of you know, and some of our listeners might not know this, but we have a new voting system, and it is a choice between voting a hand-marked paper ballot or voting on new touchscreen machines that have a paper audit trail with them. In other words, you as a voter get a readout of the choices you've made on the ballot that you look over and see that they are accurate, and then you feed into a digital scanner. If you vote a hand-marked paper ballot, you feed your ballot into that same digital scanner, and from there it goes into a ballot box as another potential audit trail in the election results. So what are you seeing in terms of the choice? Are more voters choosing one than the other at this point?
Vastly more voters are selecting to use the ballot marking device. It's very familiar because it's very similar to what we had in the past. Again, you make your selections on a touch screen, as you've done for the last 15 years or so. And the difference is, of course, then you get a piece of paper printed out with your choices, which the voter can then examine and take over to the tabulator scanner, and it'll be scanned and tabulated at that point.
Okay. Ian, you chose hand-marked paper ballots. Did you choose it because of the constitutional amendment, or what went into your choice on that?
Well, earlier in the day, I'd received a phone call from someone that I know, and they told me they had a problem with the hand-marked paper ballot. So I said I'd vote that way just to see if there was any issue. And I think what was reported to me was isolated because I did not have an issue at all. And as you know, the Shelby County Voter Alliance, along with the Election Commission, demonstrated the new voting machines during early voting this past August, July. And we didn't have really any complaints about the machines then. We haven't had, or I haven't heard of any complaints about the machines now. And I think we've done a pretty good job of letting people know that the new machines are out there. There are billboards up around town. The Voter Alliance did a lunch and learn on that. There are demonstration videos that are out. So if somebody wants to learn about the new voting machines, they have every opportunity to do so.
Right. Right. Linda, have you heard any complaints about the hand-marked paper ballots that Ian encountered?
No, we really haven't. Our poll workers were a little nervous on day one, and it might have taken them a little extra time to generate them. But everybody's comfortable with it now, and we really haven't had any complaints.
And for proponents of the hand-marked paper ballots, a really big issue with them was okay. Well, how do you know that you can vote, that you have this choice? So describe for me what happens. This is practically the first thing that the voter encounters when they walk in, right?
Right. When they come into, they sign in, which, you have always done in Tennessee. You've signed a ballot application. And then once you are checked in and your precinct is determined, then you will be asked whether you prefer a machine marked ballot or a hand marked ballot. And there's little cards in front of every check-in station with your choices. And poll workers are not supposed to try to influence your choice. They're just to tell you that it's completely your choice. They're read by the same scanner, the same software. If they want one, ask for one. So. You've seen at some locations, you see signs that said demand a paper ballot. And I guess my response to that is just ask, we'll give you one.
All right. Ian, the Alliance includes a number of organizations who have been working for several years now to build voter turnout using various methods. Describe for me how incremental are the gains that you're looking for election to election? And does a perennial low turnout election like a primary, has that undone gains that you feel like your work has produced in elections before that?
Well, when we look at the elections, we try to compare one type of election to the similar type of election in the past. So I wouldn't look at what's going on right now and compare that to 2020. I'd go back to 2018 when we had a midterm, and I do the same thing with every other election that we've been through. When we look at the numbers, yes, we have very lofty goals. Like Linda and I said at the beginning, we'd like to see 100% turnout, but election over election, year over year, I'd like to see anywhere from realistically 2 to 5% increase in the turnout numbers. And if you can keep on pace with that each election cycle, then I think, over time you've made some real gains. And for us, the biggest thing, the two biggest things, voter apathy, and that comes in a lot of different shades. Whereas, hey, my person went through the primary and they don't have a general election challenger, so I can sit this out. That's a form of voter apathy to the person on the street just saying my vote doesn't matter and I'm not going. To the other extreme of voter apathy. So those are some things. And then when we do work with children, we notice that a lot of the young adults are not coming out of houses where voting is prioritized. So they don't see a reason why they should. But, if we catch those people when they're 18, 19, 20 years old and get them involved in the process, they're more than likely to be a lifelong voter. Even if it's not a super voter, they're more than likely to be a lifelong voter.
Mm-hmm. Linda, we have online voter registration. Have you seen any indication that would-be voters are taking more advantage of that?
Well, yes. I mean, online voter registration has dramatically reduced the amount of paper registrations that we get, and it's also dramatically reduced the number of people who come into our office. Having said that, we didn't have online registration in 2016. That didn't come in until later, but we did not get the quantity of applications this cycle that I would have expected for a November election.
Mm-hmm. You did see, I believe, an increase in absentee balloting at the outset of early voting. Has that held up throughout this period?
Yes, we have sent about 30% more absentee applications than I had estimated. And so, we'll see how many of those ballots come back.
All right. In looking through the Election Commission's last report on voter registration from this month, it looks to me like the number of voters ages 38 through 47 has shown some growth compared to the same report in September 2020 and the July 2022 report, showing by my count about 600 more voters there, making that the third highest age bracket. Meanwhile, the number of voters ages 48 to 57, which had been the third highest age group, is down by about 3,000 compared to September 2020. What do you think is going on there, do you think?
Well, I think it has mostly to do with list maintenance. We did, the county commission graciously funded us to mail a postcard to every registered voter last March, April, somewhere in that range, to apprise them of their new precinct name and number and their new districts, because many of the districts changed. And a very large number of those were returned as undeliverable. And so I think that's really what the impact is right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ian, what do you see in those in those numbers? I don't want to foster a competition here among age groups, but those numbers don't appear to change too easily from election to election, and yet we've had some growth, as I said, 38 through 47, and a bigger drop, 48 to 57 ages.
And that's in voter registration numbers.
Okay. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
This is not voter participation. This is voter registration. Yes.
Well, I'll take 1% credit for the increase in the numbers.
Well, there have been a lot of organizations that, as I said, that have been working at this, and it's kind of painstaking work, one at a time, right?
Yes, and we do promote online voter registration, but the Voter Alliance is made up of over 50 different organizations, and as I constantly tell them, voter registration doesn't stop. We may have seen a little run up in one of your age brackets before this election for November, but I tell people, just because October 11th has passed doesn't mean voter registration stops. The people we register now will be registered for the city election in October 23. So that's my thought on that. We're constantly out doing voter registration and trying to get as many people registered as we can. Mm-hmm. That's our focus.
Yeah, and Linda, that's also the Election Commission's focus, right?
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We just, we do our best to get them registered and get them registered quickly. Although right now we have to stack up what's coming in until after the election. So. Right.
2018, the midterm election was the first majority turnout. The majority of the registered voters in the county turned out for the first time in a non-presidential general election since 1994. But we also had a Senate race on that ballot in 2018. And we also had a race for governor too. This time around, different cycle, we've got a race for governor, no Senate race on there. What's the value of a statewide race to turn out, do you think?
Well, I think one of the things that happens when you have a statewide race that has a lot of money involved in it, there's a lot of television ads that have been bought. There's a lot of billboards. There's a lot of things that give voters the information that, yes, there is an election and it's just important. Since we don't have a Senate race in this one, that money is not being spent. And the Bill Lee campaign has been fairly low key. So it's not the constant barrage of ads we saw in 2018.
Yeah. Ian, what are your thoughts about that? You kind of need two statewide races, it seems, going to kind of get the juices flowing here, right?
Yeah, and that's, as we said earlier, that helps in the primary. When you have two people going at each other, and people are forced to pick which one they want to carry over into the general. And going into the general, you may see some tamp down of voter turnout, especially if the people who have gone through the primary process are pretty much running unopposed, or their opponent doesn't have a very, very strong presence, so to speak. And the assumption is that the person who is the dominant person coming out of the primary is going to win anyway. So there again, people may stay at home after that primary has gone. But yeah, it helps to have some competitive races at the top of the ticket.
Right. Linda, a final point. The wording of ballot questions, whether it's a state constitutional amendment or a city charter amendment, it's always kind of fraught with peril because it has to meet legal standards, and it all has to fit in a certain way, and it can surprise voters. Are there any other places that are kind of experimenting with alternatives to that, or is there only really one way to put a ballot question out there?
Well, I think there's a matter of voters educating themselves about what those ballot questions means. And I certainly wouldn't go to our website and read them for that. The Tennessee League of Women Voters has a good explanation of the for ballot, and it's very neutral. So I would recommend that voters look for real information about what this really says at that site. Unfortunately, the law, the constitutional amendments have to be phrased in a certain way, and it's not perhaps the most understandable. Mm-hmm. So we just kind of have to live with it and hope that we can get voters educated about what they really say.
Right. Ian, how much have you encountered voters who say, I saw that, I couldn't tell what it was, heads or tails?
Yeah, and talking to people about these ballot issues, the Voter Alliance did a lunch and learn on the ballot issues about 3-4 weeks ago. And when people read the verbiage from the ballot amendment, yes, it is confusing to them. And we spend a lot of time explaining, in layman's term, what the ballot amendments mean. And for a couple of them, like the one for governor, which is the secession for governor, I believe that's number 2, is really long. And so we did a kind of illustration to show what that meant. So, people that we talked to, we just show them a picture, and it's like, oh, that's what all that stuff meant. Like, yes. So I really wish they would find a way to simplify the verbiage around amendments and any other thing that they're trying to get passed, whether that's state, county, or city, because they all do the same thing. It's like something that's so simple, but we have to word it in a way to make it as confusing as possible.
Right. And before we go, I'm going to take my shot at that particular amendment. The Speaker of the House is in the line of succession to become the governor if the governor is temporarily incapacitated or leaves office for some reason. It then goes to the lieutenant governor. If there's no lieutenant governor, then it goes to the House Speaker. And this amendment says that the House Speaker can do that and still remain the House Speaker and a member of the state House. But the House Speaker cannot vote on matters or introduce bills while he or she is acting as governor. How'd I do?
And they don't get a pay raise.
Right. They don't get a pay raise. They get the same pay as acting governor that they get as the House Speaker. I knew I'd forget something. Okay. All right. We have been talking on this Daily Memphian on the Record podcast with Shelby County Election Administrator Linda Phillips and Ian Randolph of the Shelby County Voter Alliance. I'm Bill Dries. This has been On the Record.